Hi, I'm Abby and this is Abby Matt Reads. And look who went to the opticians the other day. I've joined the glasses club. This is my very late September wrap up. We had a bit of a problem with the software that I usually record in, so I couldn't do it until now. I have read 7 books in September. Some of them were for Tomb Infinity and Beyond, which was my first read along, and I loved it and I got everything done. It was brilliant. So now I'll show you the books. The first book I read in September was Cersei, I don't know. I've seen it, whenever any other booktubers talk about it, they call it a different pronunciation each time. So I have no idea how to pronounce this. It is a Greek retelling of a mythological kind of goddess, Cersei, whatever, who was not really accepted by her family of gods, went to Earth to see how humans lived, as she was curious, and fell in love with one of them. And she performed a kind of spell just to try and make him a god so that they could have a relationship. But there was another woman involved, and the magic that Cersei then used on her caused her to be banned from the heavens and banished into this small island where she became a witch and grew magical herbs and plants and lived alone. She did have a few visitors, other famous people in Greek mythology, which made it interesting, but I did struggle through this. I thought it was quite disjointed. I know it's really popular on BookTube, and I haven't really heard anyone else say that they don't like it, but it felt to me the kind of adventures she goes on and the different people she meets that come to her island or she goes to them, it seemed more like a bunch of short stories than one actual novel that flowed, and I couldn't get into it. It was good. The writing style is amazing and it was very interesting. It was never boring. But I only give this book 3, I had to count my fingers then, 3 out of 5 stars. The second book I finished in September was The Last of August, which was a buddy read with Cressida, who is a Starcross Books. I will link her channel down below. This is the sequel to A Study in Charlotte, which is about like the great granddaughter, Charlotte Holmes, and of Sherlock Holmes, obviously, and the great grandson of Dr. Watson, who happened to meet at a prep school in Connecticut, and things go wrong, a murder happens, they are blamed, and that's the first book. But this kind of follows on. They're in Europe this time. I'm not going to give too much away, but I did not enjoy this as much as Study in Charlotte, and I only gave A Study in Charlotte 3 stars anyway, but this was just not as good. The thing I loved about A Study in Charlotte was the relationship between Jamie Watson and Charlotte Holmes, and that just kind of fizzled out in this. It became something that annoyed me. The plot, it was... Not only did it not make sense, but it was also predictable at the very same time, which is weird. And the ending was atrocious. It absolutely made no sense at all. So I'm only giving this book 2 out of 5 stars. The third book I read in September was part of Tomb Infinity and Beyond, and it was The Martian by Andy Weir. Now, this is a reread for me, and The Martian is not just one of my favorite, it is my favorite sci-fi book, but it's also one of my favorite books, like, of all time. It is amazing. Mark Watney is stranded on Mars because the spaceship that took him and his crewmates to Mars left thinking he had died in a kind of storm that happened in Mars. And he's not dead, so he had to find a way to survive until someone could pick him up and take him back to Earth. What I loved is the amount of like research that Andy Weir must have done for The Martian, because it makes it feel so believable. The scientific explanations he gives for things are just so well thought out, and it really warms your heart as well. There's this thing about the human spirit, how everyone on Earth is rooting for Mark to get home, and it's just really heartwarming. And it's also, he's a really funny guy. He keeps this log while he's on Mars, and it's just hilarious to read, even though he is in the depths of despair, really, and I would just be very depressed, very stressed. I would not be laughing about anything, but it just goes to show what a cool guy he is. And it also makes me cry. There's one bit towards the end, obviously I'm not going to tell you what it is, that always makes me cry every time. And I loved rereading this book, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The fourth book I read in September was, again, a Tomb Infinity and Beyond read. It is my grandfather's copy of the Midwich Cuckoos, and it is brilliant. It is about a small village or town that has a kind of day out, which is what they call it, where the whole inhabitants of this town just become unconscious for over 24 hours. And you really have to pay attention to the details. I read this years ago, and I think I just kind of read it too quickly, because there's little details, like at one point they mentioned very slowly that they got a plane that flew just far enough over the town to see this kind of curved craft in the village green, which I didn't notice before, and that kind of freaked me out. But the weird thing is that when the women of Midwich wake up, they discover that they are all pregnant, and of course these are not properly human babies. The real horror begins when these kind of golden-eyed babies are born and start like controlling their parents psychically and things. It's quite harrowing, and there is a lot of dialogue in this book. If you don't like books that consist mainly of dialogue, then this might not be for you. But I loved it. There's speculation between the kind of, not, I want to say village elders, but that makes it sound really ancient. But the kind of like authority figures in the village, they're always speculating and going into all these different theories about what is happening in Midwich. And it's just really interesting to read. And again, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The fifth book, and again part of Tomb Infinity and Beyond, is The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. This is kind of actually a dystopian story, which I wasn't expecting. Bill Mason works with Triffids, which are a kind of very dangerous plant that will eat and attack humans. One of them stings him in his eye, causing him to spend time in hospital with bandages over his eyes, which is lucky because a cosmic event happens and all that witness it become blind. Bill wakes up, takes the bandages off his eyes, and sets about in this now kind of apocalyptic world, which is eerily reminiscent of kind of The Walking Dead. The society is broken into different sections of people who are trying their best to survive. There are some people that can see and some people that are blind, and new rules get made. And even though it's quite a bleak book, this struggle to survive really drives the story. The Triffids are there all along. They can walk. They're really scary. And the worst thing is that if you're blind, you can't see them sneaking up on you. I literally couldn't put this book down, and again, I give it 5 out of 5 stars. The sixth book I read in September, and not a 5-star read, even though it was also for Tomb Infinity and Beyond, as a discovery of witches. It is about a witch named Diana who works in Oxford University Library and discovers a manuscript that all these creatures want, because there's witches, there's vampires, and there's demons. And as soon as she finds it, she finds herself under close scrutiny from all these creatures, because it's a very valuable manuscript. She doesn't even understand it. She doesn't like being a witch. She never uses her powers. And the first, I would say, half of this book, I nearly DNF'd it, because this vampire Matthew comes in who feels like he's gonna save her or something like that. And there's just like lots of going on dates and going to bloody yoga together, where there's lots of witches and vampires and demons doing yoga. Okay. And it's just like, I'm not a romance reader. That stuff just does not interest me. Matthew's always drinking wine. Like, he's 1,500 years old and seemingly has collected wine throughout his entire lifetime and just has it all over the place in all of his abodes. And Diana's always bloody drinking tea. I've never known anyone drink as much tea as this witch. But it does get better. The more, when you get later on into the book, more kind of magic comes to the front. There is a kind of science, like a history of science of the creatures, like how they became who they became, which was really interesting. I enjoyed the later part of the book. It's just a shame about the first half or so. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. The last book I read was Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Sam from Sarcasm and Sci-Fi set up a read-along for this, and I very much wanted to join in. I missed the start date because I'm an idiot, but I did catch up, and it's a great book. I got it from the library. It's really interesting. It features a man named Guy Montag, who's kind of apathetic with his life. He's a fireman, but in this book, firemen don't put out fires, they start them. They burn books. Books are illegal, books are banned, which is ironic because this book was banned. That is really crazy. And he secretly collects books and puts them in an air vent up in his house. He's in a kind of loveless kind of marriage. There's a kind of war that's going on. Like, they keep seeing like fighter jets going over the top. You don't really hear of it. It's all these clever little nuances in this book. And it just carries on with his struggle that he feels he's different and that he wants to change things. I won't go too deeply into this book because I really think you should just read it yourself. It is really thought-provoking. It is beautifully written. And I absolutely adored it. So, like, God, how many 5-star books have we got now? Is this I think this is the 4th. Yeah, 4 out of 6 of my books have got 5 stars. And that's it for now. Thank you for watching. I know it's very late to put a September wrap-up out. I'm sorry about that. Hope you've actually watched it. Well, if you're watching this, then you have watched it. So thank you. My Twitter is @AbbieMattReads. Facebook page, facebook.com/AbbieMattReads. I have enjoyed doing this. I hope you enjoyed the video.